Hi there, my name is Greg Drummond. I'm the pastor of Bayers Road Baptist Church in Halifax. I started here in September 2015, and today I want to share with you some of the tips that I've gained and practices I've done as I've encountered something that new pastors can be challenged with and seasoned pastors can be challenged with, and it's dealing with funerals for people that you don't know. Being brand new, that was everyone. And so on September 29th, less than a month into my first month as pastor, I got a call that one of our shut-ins had died, a man named Cy. And the first thing I did was I called people in the church to let them know, other than talking to the family first. I called people in the church to let them know. And I started to ask them this question: what do you remember about Cy? As I asked that question, the identity of Cy started to come out. I started to learn that he was a man who greeted people. He was an usher. He was a jokester. People loved his sense of humor, and he always had Smarties in his pocket to give to little kids who came. So it created this image of Cy in my mind, of the character and identity of who he was. The second thing I did, and I continue to do with people who've passed away and their family, is I meet with the family, and instead of going straight into order of service planning, seeing what scriptures are going to be, seeing what songs there are going to be, I start to ask them to tell me about their dad, their husband, their grandfather, and say, what stands out in your mind about him? Tell me about them. And just have this conversation to allow memories to come to the surface. And as they talk, there's sadness, but there's also joy and hope as they reminisce and remember. And we use those feelings, that sense, to how do we create a service that represents who this man or who this woman was. So meeting with the family, before you get into any kind of planning of service, you allow this conversation to reflect on memories of character, of who they are, what their hopes, what their dreams are, what they loved, and allow that to shape the service. Number 3, out of those conversations, the conversation with other people, the conversations with the family, is to find a tangible object that can help people connect to the memory of the person who's died. So Cy, I mentioned, had Smarties in his pocket. So when we had the reception, I said to the family, why don't we get some Smarties? We'll put the Smarties in a bowl, and we'll have him out at the reception, because people knew him as the Smartie guy. So when people came down the reception, they're talking, they're socializing, they're looking at pictures, and they see these bowls of Smarties set out, and it just clicks, and there's joy coming to them as they remember, as they eat, as they fellowship, and it's what's needed to help move on in their time of loss. We did it for another man who loved woodworking. I asked the family, I knew they did woodworking, and I asked the family if they had cups or a lamp or something that he's done that we can put out there. And they were just amazed at the thought that we could do this. I said, yeah, we can do this. It'll help people connect. And people said, I didn't know he loved it this much. I didn't know he was this proficient at it. And it added this other layer of knowledge of who the person was and appreciation of their life. Number 4, use scriptures that reflect both the gospel and the character of the person. Sometimes scriptures are given to us, and sometimes we have to search for them ourselves. So when one man died, I chose Psalm 1. This is the woodworking man. And Psalm 1 is about the tree planted by streams of living water, a tree that grows and is rooted in God. And he was a man who was quiet, who loved wood, but he was a man who also, he was faithful. The phrase that continued, it was this faithful man. So like a tree that's quiet, that's in the forest, people may see it, they may not, faithfully grows in his faith, nourishes those who've come in contact with him. There's this connection of wood, but it's a character that shows a man who is connected to God. So it's finding scripture that appropriately represents the man's or the woman's life, as well as the gospel of Christ. The last thing is, when we preach, most of us will preach at a funeral, or we'll give a word of blessing or benediction, or we'll be speaking in one way or another. And when we preach to the living, we don't preach to the dead. And as we preach, we know, most of us know, instinctively that we want to preach words of hope, we want to preach words of comfort and resurrection. But one of the things that we need to preach, and sometimes it's not acknowledged and it can be neglected, is we need to publicly acknowledge death and loss and hurt. So one of the things that I do as I've done these funerals, I will say, like a woman named Mary had passed away, I say, Mary has died, and we miss her, and we sense her loss, and it hurts. And that's okay. And as we say that, we give permission to feel these things, to feel pain, to feel loss, to feel hurt, because they are there. And at a funeral, a memorial, a celebration of life, it's time to acknowledge these things, say this person was in our life, they are gone, it hurts, it's painful. We acknowledge that, and when we do that, now we can move forward in hope and comfort and the presence of friends and loved ones and the God who loves us. So those are the 5 things that I've done as a new pastor in a new congregation, or working with people that I don't know, asking people what do they remember, meeting the family, seeing what stands out in their mind, allowing that to shape the discussion, finding an object that people can visually and physically, tangibly connect with to help them remember, using scriptures that appropriately fit their character, and then preaching to the living words not only just of hope, but acknowledging loss and death and hurt, and that's okay. So it's a way for me to connect, and it's been a blessing, and it's a ministry that I'll probably have a long part of my life.